There is a curious thing about being marked by God. It is not something you can purchase with effort, nor can it be erased by criticism. When God sets a person apart, it is as if he writes a quiet inscription upon their soul, invisible to the casual glance, yet undeniable to those who look long enough, and the world, though it may resist, cannot help but notice. Many spend their lives chasing sameness, bending themselves to fit into patterns that are already crumbling. They mimic the voice of the crowd, dress themselves in borrowed convictions, and hope the noise will drown out the ache of meaning. But the one whom God has set apart feels the inadequacy of imitation. A restlessness grows in them, a holy discontent with shadows, and a hunger for the real. Such a person discovers that separation is not isolation. To be set apart is not to be taken away from humanity, but rather to be given back to it more fully. For the world does not need another echo, it needs a clear voice. It does not need one more masked face, it needs the light of an unveiled countenance. And so, though the chosen one may walk lonely paths, they are never abandoned, for the one who called them apart walks beside them. The world will notice, but not always kindly. Some will look with wonder, others with suspicion. Light is uncomfortable for eyes accustomed to the dark. Truth unsettles those who have made peace with convenient lies, yet the very resistance is a confirmation that the mark is real. No one bothers to oppose what is ordinary. It is the uncommon flame that draws both warmth, seekers, and those who would extinguish it. But here lies the paradox. The more you live as one set apart, the less you are absorbed in the world's opinions. You begin to see that the world's gaze is neither your anchor nor your compass. You were not chosen for applause nor for rejection. You were chosen for a purpose. And when that purpose begins to unfold, it will not be the magnitude of the task that astonishes, but the quiet certainty that you were made for it all along. The world notices, yes, but God notices first. It was His hand that shaped your peculiarities, His wisdom that wove together your strengths with your weaknesses, His love that hid within you a treasure that could only be revealed through trial. To be set apart is not a sentence of pride, but of service. It is not the lifting up of self, but the lifting up of what He has placed within you for the good of others. So do not shrink from the gaze of the world, whether it comes in admiration or hostility. Both are but fleeting reflections compared to the steady eyes of the one who called you. You were set apart not to vanish in the crowd, but to shine in such a way that others may glimpse, through your life, a greater light than your own. To be set apart is not to be isolated, but to be made more fully human, called to bring clarity where the world echoes only confusion. When we think of being set apart, the mind often drifts toward images of solitude, separation, and even rejection. It feels as though to be marked by God is to stand outside of the circle where everyone else is gathered, to be left in the shadows while the rest bask in the warmth of company. Yet that is a misunderstanding. God does not mark someone to strip them of life, but to fill their life with a greater depth, a truer essence, a calling that makes them more whole than they were before. To be set apart is not to be diminished, but to be deepened. It is not to be pushed away from the world, but to be drawn into its heart with clearer vision and greater strength. When the world echoes confusion, the set, apart soul becomes a voice of clarity. There is a difference between noise and sound. The world generates a great deal of noise, a constant murmur of opinions, trends, and shifting standards. It promises answers, but rarely delivers truth. In such a place, a person marked by God carries not more noise but sound, a resonance that cuts through the fog. Their life is not merely filled with words, but with weight, not merely opinions, but convictions, not merely desires, but direction. This is why being set apart can never be equated with being removed. The world needs such voices too badly. The one set apart is not a deserter of humanity, but a servant of it, bringing substance where there is only chatter, bringing order where there is only chaos. To be made more fully human is to live in alignment with the design of the Creator. The tragedy of our age, and indeed of every age, is that so many reduce their humanity to appetite, to desire, to fleeting pursuits that neither satisfy nor last. But when God sets someone apart, He awakens in them a higher hunger. They become aware that they were not designed merely to consume but to contribute, not merely to survive but to create, not merely to exist but to embody meaning. Such a person may at first feel the sting of difference, the awkwardness of not fitting into the ready-made molds of culture. Yet that very discomfort is the early sign of transformation. The mark of being set apart is not conformity but distinctiveness, not the ability to blend but the courage to stand. It is not an easy thing to stand when everyone else is seated. It is not simple to speak when silence is expected, nor to resist when surrender is fashionable. But the one set apart discovers a source of strength that is not their own. It is as though God lends them his backbone, his fire, his courage. They may tremble, but they do not break. They may stumble, but they do not collapse. They may be opposed, but they are not erased. For being set apart is not a decision of man, it is an act of God, and what he marks cannot be undone by the shifting winds of society. Confusion thrives on the absence of clarity, and clarity is what the set apart soul brings. This does not always mean eloquence, for clarity is not merely about words. Sometimes it is in action, in the quiet steadfastness of a life lived with integrity. Sometimes it is in compassion, in the ability to love when the world is cold and transactional. Sometimes it is in sacrifice, in the willingness to give when the world is clutching to keep. Clarity takes many forms, but it always points in the same direction. It shows others that there is another way, a truer way, a way that is not bound by the shifting shadows, but anchored in something eternal. The irony is that to be set apart is to become the very thing the world longs for, even when it resists it. People crave authenticity, yet often recoil when faced with it. They desire truth, but they are unsettled by its demands. They hunger for light, but they flinch when their darkness is revealed. Yet still, they notice. They may not always understand, and they may not always welcome, but they cannot deny. To carry the mark of God is to live in such a way that indifference becomes impossible. You may be loved or you may be hated, but you will not be ignored. At the heart of being set apart is service, though it may not feel that way in the beginning. Many imagine that being chosen by God is a pathway to honor, to recognition, to privilege. But the truth is far different. To be set apart is to be called to a burden as much as to a blessing. It is to carry light into places that would prefer darkness, to carry hope into places addicted to despair, to carry truth into places allergic to honesty. This is not always glamorous, indeed, it is often thankless, but it is through such service that the fullness of humanity is revealed. For man is never more human than when he is living not for himself but for others, never more alive than when his life becomes a channel for something greater than his own desires. Isolation diminishes a soul, sanctification expands it. When God sets you apart, he enlarges you. Your heart becomes capable of greater love, your mind capable of greater depth, your spirit capable of greater endurance. You are no longer content with surface things because you have glimpsed the depths. You are no longer distracted by shallow noise because you have heard the deeper sound, and though this separates you from the common current, it also roots you in a greater reality. You are not drifting away from humanity, you are being anchored in its truest form. There will be moments when this calling feels heavy, when being set apart feels less like an honor and more like an exile. Yet even in those moments there is a hidden gift, for exile in the eyes of the world often means nearness in the eyes of God. To walk apart from the crowd is to walk nearer to the one who called you, and in his presence the loneliness dissolves, the confusion clears, and the meaning becomes undeniable. Thus, to be set apart is to be given back to the world in a new way. You no longer live to echo its confusion, but to bring clarity. You no longer strive to mirror its patterns, but to reveal its possibilities. You no longer chase after its fading prizes, but to display treasures of greater worth. You are not less human for being marked by God. You are more human, more whole, more alive, more true. And though the world may not always understand, it will notice. For in a sea of echoes, even a single clear voice resounds with undeniable power. The world notices not because you resemble it, but because you no longer belong to its patterns. You carry a light that cannot be disguised. There is something in human nature that is drawn to recognition, to the comfort of belonging, to the relief of not standing out, to move with the current, to walk in step with the crowd, to blend in so that no questioning eyes fall upon us. This seems easier, safer, and even natural. Yet, when God has marked someone for himself, this quiet arrangement with the world is no longer possible. A difference begins to show, subtle at first, almost invisible, but growing steadily until it becomes undeniable. It is not that the chosen one tries to be different for difference's sake, nor that they cultivate eccentricities as a mask of uniqueness. Rather, it is that something at the very core of their being no longer bends in the same direction as the rest of the world. The patterns of the world are woven with threads of self, interest, competition, and appearance. They shift constantly, and what is celebrated today is discarded tomorrow. These patterns promise fulfillment but leave only weariness. They offer belonging but demand the loss of identity. To belong in such a system is to become like clay molded by countless hands, pressed into shapes that serve someone else's design. But when God calls a person out of that system, he frees them from the endless need to conform. They find themselves no longer satisfied with empty repetition, no longer willing to bow to the idols of culture, no longer able to walk comfortably in paths that lead nowhere. This dissonance, though uncomfortable, is the very sign that they are being transformed. Light cannot be disguised even when hidden. A candle placed in a dark room still radiates, still exposes, still draws the eye. So it is with the one whom God has set apart. Even when they try to keep to themselves, their life radiates a quiet distinction. They think differently, they love differently, they endure differently. They may not be louder than others, but there is a weight in their presence, a steadiness that unsettles those around them. The world notices not because they clamor for attention, but because the attention naturally gravitates to what stands out against the ordinary. It is worth noting that the world's notice is not always flattering. Sometimes it comes as admiration, sometimes as suspicion, and sometimes as hostility. Light reveals what darkness prefers to keep hidden. When a person lives with integrity, it exposes the emptiness of deceit. When a person forgives, it unsettles the culture of vengeance. When a person serves, it challenges the pursuit of self-interest. The world does not always welcome these contrasts. Yet even in its rejection, the world testifies to the undeniable presence of the light. For indifference is reserved for what blends in, but attention, whether loving or hostile, always follows what stands apart. The tragedy of many is not that they are unnoticed, but that they live unnoticed because they are indistinguishable. They have folded themselves into the patterns of the world so neatly that they vanish into the crowd. Their words echo popular phrases, their desires mirror the latest fashions, their lives are sculpted by whatever trend promises satisfaction. But the one whom God marks cannot endure such invisibility. They may try to disappear, but their light betrays them. They may attempt to blend in, but their convictions reveal them. They may walk quietly, but the path they choose draws attention because it refuses the shortcuts and illusions that others have accepted. The light they carry is not their own. That is why it cannot be disguised. Human charisma fades, human brilliance falters, human strength exhausts itself. But the light of God placed within a soul is steady, enduring, and inexplicable. It makes no sense to the world, for it does not originate from the world. It is as though a window has been opened in their soul, and through it something beyond this earth shines, and no matter how much they might try to explain or excuse it, others sense the difference. Some are drawn to it, longing for the peace it offers. Others are repelled, uncomfortable with the exposure it creates. But none can deny that it is there. There is a paradox in this reality. The more one seeks to resemble the world, the more invisible they become. But the more one belongs to God, the more visible they become, even if they never sought attention. This is why those who are set apart often find themselves bewildered at the notice they receive. They do not consider themselves extraordinary, nor do they crave recognition. In fact, they often feel inadequate, unworthy, even weak. Yet precisely in that humility the light shines more clearly, for the less it is about them, the more it is about the one who mocked them. And when the world notices, it is not ultimately noticing the person, but the presence within them. To no longer belong to the patterns of the world is to live in freedom. It is to walk without being tethered to every cultural demand, every shifting opinion, every fleeting trend. It is to know that your worth is not anchored in applause, your identity not dependent on acceptance, your future not tied to circumstances. This freedom is striking. Others see it and wonder how it is possible to walk with such confidence, such peace, such assurance. They may not understand the source, but they notice the effect, and in noticing, some will begin to search for that same freedom themselves. The world notices not only in the great moments, but in the small. A word of kindness when anger was expected, a choice of honesty when deception was easier, a posture of humility when pride was the norm. These are the sparks that draw attention. The set-apart soul does not shine through grand gestures alone, but through the steady glow of daily faithfulness. It is in the quiet decisions, the unseen sacrifices, the unnoticed acts of love that the light becomes most undeniable. And though the world may overlook such things in the moment, in time it cannot help but see that there is something different, something enduring, something that resists explanation. To live in such a way is not always comfortable, but it is always meaningful. For to no longer belong to the world's patterns is to belong more fully to God's, and that belonging creates a life that speaks louder than words, a presence that radiates without effort, a light that shines even when unacknowledged. The world notices not because you demanded to be seen, but because you cannot help but be different. And though it may not always welcome the difference, it is changed by the reality of it. Resistance and misunderstanding are proof of the mark upon you, for no one troubles over what is ordinary. Only the uncommon flame draws both warmth and opposition. There is a strange comfort in this truth, though at first it does not feel comforting. To be resisted, to be misunderstood, to have one's motives questioned or one's actions criticized can feel like evidence of failure. Most people believe that if something is good and true, it will be universally welcomed, immediately recognized, and embraced by all. Yet reality is far different. Every noble thing, every beautiful truth, every divine calling has faced its share of resistance. In fact, the very presence of resistance often signals that you are on the right path, not the wrong one. For mediocrity passes unnoticed, but the extraordinary, the luminous, the set apart, it cannot help but provoke a reaction. The world is comfortable with what it understands and uncomfortable with what it cannot easily explain. When a person chooses to walk in integrity while others cut corners, there will be whispers about their intentions. When someone chooses to love without conditions in a culture that trades love like currency, there will be suspicions about hidden motives. When a soul decides to live by convictions rather than convenience, there will be accusations of pride or self-righteousness. This is the way of the world, for it resents what exposes its compromises. Your difference unsettles not because it is harmful, but because it reveals what others would rather keep hidden. And so resistance comes not as a punishment, but as confirmation that you are carrying a flame the darkness cannot ignore. No one bothers to resist what is common. The ordinary blends into the background, escapes notice, and stirs no emotion. But the uncommon flame draws attention, both welcome and unwelcome. Think of fire in the night. It attracts those who are cold, who long for warmth, who see in it the possibility of comfort and hope. But it also draws those who fear its power, who feel threatened by its brightness, who would prefer the night to remain unbroken. Light reveals, and revelation is rarely convenient. The flame within you, placed there by God, will inevitably disturb some while comforting others. It is not your responsibility to control who responds which way. It is simply your task to keep the flame alive, to remain faithful to the light entrusted to you. Misunderstanding is a companion of being set apart. Even those who admire you may not fully comprehend you. They may project onto you expectations you never promised to fulfill, or assume motives that do not match your heart. You may find that your silence is mistaken for indifference, your compassion mistaken for weakness, your steadfastness mistaken for stubborn pride. This is part of the cost of carrying something uncommon. The uncommon is rarely named correctly by those who only know the common, and though the sting of being misunderstood can wound deeply, it is also a sign that you are no longer bound to the categories the world has prepared. You do not fit neatly into its boxes, for you were never made for them. The resistance you face will not always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from those closest to you, even those who love you, for your calling may demand a path they cannot yet see. They may question your choices, doubt your direction, or attempt to persuade you back into safer patterns. This, too, is a form of misunderstanding. It does not mean they are evil or malicious. It means they cannot yet perceive what God has placed within you. And so you must learn to walk steadily even when affirmation is absent, to trust the mark of God even when others do not recognize it, to believe in the uncommon flame even when others try to cover it with their fear. There is another truth hidden in resistance. It shapes you. Opposition forces roots to grow deeper, faith to grow stronger, courage to grow steadier. Without resistance, you might drift into complacency, imagining the path was yours alone to choose. With resistance, you are reminded that the path was marked out by one greater than you, and that only his strength can sustain you. Misunderstanding teaches you patience, teaches you humility, teaches you the art of being faithful without being praised. It strips away the need for constant approval and teaches you to rest in the approval of God alone. In this way, the very things that seem to wound you become instruments of your growth. The uncommon flame you carry is not for yourself alone. It is for others as well, for those who will draw near to it in their time of need. And so resistance must be expected, because what threatens darkness will always be opposed by it. But just as a fire cannot be extinguished by the night, the mark of God cannot be erased by opposition. It may flicker under the winds of criticism, it may burn low under the weight of misunderstanding, but it will not go out. In fact, often the winds that seem to threaten the flame only cause it to burn stronger, brighter, fiercer. There is a temptation when faced with resistance to hide the flame, to cover it, to retreat into the safety of the ordinary. Many have done so, trading the discomfort of opposition for the comfort of anonymity. Yet in doing so, they forfeit the very purpose for which they were set apart. A flame that hides itself ceases to be a flame in any meaningful sense. Its purpose is not to remain unseen, but to shine, to reveal, to warm, to guide. The uncommon flame was never meant to be disguised. It was meant to be displayed, regardless of the cost. It is important to remember that opposition is not ultimate. Resistance may be loud, but it is not final. Misunderstanding may be painful, but it does not define you. The final word belongs not to the crowd, nor to the critics, nor even to those who misjudge you. The final word belongs to the one who lit the flame in you in the first place. And he does not make mistakes. He does not abandon what he has set apart. He does not withdraw his mark because the world fails to understand it. The uncommon flame will always draw notice, for warmth and opposition are drawn to it in equal measure. The very proof that you are set apart lies in the reactions you evoke. Were you ordinary, no one would trouble themselves over you. Were you simply a mirror of the world, it would pass you by without a glance. But because you carry something different, something luminous, something eternal, the world cannot help but respond. And though the responses may differ, some coming with open hands, others with clenched fists, they are all testimonies to the same truth. The flame within you is real, and it is not ordinary. God's purpose in setting you apart is never self-exaltation but service. The treasure he placed within you is meant for others. There is a misconception that to be chosen, to be marked, to be given a calling means to stand above others, to enjoy privileges others are denied, to bask in the admiration of the crowd. The human heart, being what it is, often twists the idea of being set apart into a story of superiority. But that is not God's way. He does not set a person apart to make them greater than those around them, but to make them useful to those around them. His mark is not a crown for display, but a tool for service. What He places within you is never intended to be hoarded or hidden, but poured out. The gift is not merely for your keeping. It is for the world's healing. To understand this is to understand that being set apart carries weight as much as it carries wonder. A treasure buried within you is not yours to clutch for yourself. It is entrusted to you to be carried carefully, to be stewarded wisely, to be given away generously. This treasure may be your words, your compassion, your vision, your endurance, or your ability to see what others overlook. Whatever it is not random. It has been chosen for you because it is needed by others, and this shifts the focus entirely. To be set apart is not to stand in the spotlight, but to hold a lantern for others who are stumbling in the dark. Service is not glamorous, yet it is sacred. It is the quiet strength of a life lived not for self, but for others that testifies most loudly of the mark of God. A person who seeks only exaltation may rise for a moment, but they will soon fall, for self-exaltation has no roots. But a person who seeks to serve cannot be shaken easily. Their life is grounded in a purpose beyond themselves, and so they endure, even when no one applauds. The treasure they carry sustains them, for they know it is not meant to end with them. They are but vessels, channels, instruments through which something greater flows. It is tempting to believe that if God has given you something valuable, it must be because you are better than others. But the truth is humbler and more beautiful. The treasure is not proof of superiority, but of responsibility. It is a reminder that you are trusted with something meant to bless others. A doctor holds knowledge not for his own pride, but for the healing of the sick. A teacher carries wisdom not for her own exaltation, but for the growth of her students. A leader carries vision not to serve his ego, but to guide his people. So it is with the one set apart. Whatever treasure God has placed within you, its worth is found in how it is given, not in how it is kept. This kind of service often requires sacrifice. To pour out what has been entrusted to you means denying yourself the luxury of selfishness. It means being willing to give even when giving is costly, to serve even when serving is tiring, to remain faithful even when others are ungrateful. And yet it is precisely in these moments that the treasure within shines brightest, for anyone can serve when the task is easy and the applause is loud. But the one who serves quietly, persistently, joyfully even in obscurity, reveals that their treasure is real, and that it comes from a source far deeper than human recognition. The irony of this calling is that the more one gives away, the richer they become. This is the paradox of service. The treasure does not diminish as it is shared, it multiplies. Compassion grows deeper the more it is expressed. Wisdom expands the more it is taught. Love strengthens the more it is given. The one who hoards their gift finds it withers, but the one who pours it out discovers it is replenished. God does not set someone apart to clutch their treasure with clenched fists, but to release it with open hands, trusting that as they give, more will be supplied. To serve is to resemble the heart of God Himself. The Creator does not withhold the gifts of life, breath, beauty, and love. He pours them out daily, without asking for repayment, without demanding applause. When a soul marked by Him begins to live in this same rhythm, giving freely, serving selflessly, they reflect His character in the world, and the world cannot help but notice, for service is rare in a culture that celebrates self. Generosity is shocking in a world obsessed with gain. Humility shines in a time enthralled with pride. The one set apart does not need to shout their difference. It is revealed in their actions, their posture, their willingness to put others before themselves. This is not to say the path of service is easy. It is often misunderstood. Some will mistake humility for weakness. Others will take advantage of generosity. Still others will question the motives of the one who serves. But these misunderstandings do not erase the truth. They are part of the cost, part of the weight of being entrusted with something sacred. The treasure is worth the burden, the calling is worth the sacrifice. For in giving themselves away, the set-apart soul discovers the deepest meaning of their life. The treasure within you is not identical to the treasure within another. Each person marked by God is entrusted with something particular, something suited to their place, their story, their circle of influence. To compare treasures is to misunderstand them. A singer's song cannot replace a healer's touch. A builder's hands cannot replace a thinker's vision. Each is needed, each is valuable, each is purposeful, and so the one set apart does not waste their time in jealousy or competition. They simply ask, "What have I been given, and how can I pour it out for the good of others?" In this way, the life of one set apart becomes a stream of blessing. It flows outward, refreshing those who are weary, guiding those who are lost, lifting those who are broken. And as it flows, it does not dry up, for its source is not in the vessel, but in God Himself. The set-apart soul is but the channel, the treasure is divine. This knowledge guards against pride, for the one who serves remembers always that what they carry is not theirs by merit, but by mercy, and it guards against despair, for they know that what they give is never in vain, even if unseen. To be set apart, then, is to be entrusted. It is to carry a treasure that is not for you alone. It is to walk a path where self-exaltation is stripped away and service becomes the measure of greatness. It is to discover that the deepest joy is not found in being admired, but in being useful, not in being praised, but in being poured out, not in standing above others, but in stooping to lift them up. The treasure you carry is not diminished when shared. It fulfills its purpose only when given. And in that giving, you reveal why God set you apart in the first place. The world's gaze is fleeting, but God's calling is steady. You are not chosen for applause or rejection, but for a purpose written into your very being. There is something in the human spirit that longs for recognition. From childhood we seek the approving smile, the nod of affirmation, the comfort of knowing that others see and value us. As we grow older, the desire matures into more complex forms, but it never disappears. We crave to be acknowledged, to be understood, to be noticed. Yet the gaze of the world is fickle. It shifts quickly from one fascination to another, from one idol to the next, and those who were praised yesterday are often forgotten today. The applause of the crowd rises loudly but fades swiftly. To build one's life on such approval is to build on sand, for what is given one day can be withdrawn the next. When God sets you apart, He does not anchor your worth in the world's ever-changing opinion. He calls you to a steadier ground, to a purpose that is not dependent on applause or rejection, but on His eternal design. This calling is not loud, though it may be unmistakable. It whispers deep within you, resonating with your truest self, reminding you that your existence was never random. Every strength you carry, every weakness you endure, every experience you pass through is woven into the fabric of a story authored long before you understood it. And that story does not bend to the fleeting attention of the world. To be chosen is to be anchored. While others drift with the tides of public opinion, you are rooted in something unchanging. This does not mean you will never feel the sting of rejection or the thrill of praise, but it means neither will define you. For rejection, painful as it is, does not erase your calling, and applause, sweet as it sounds, does not confirm it. Both are but passing breezes against the steady flame that God Himself has lit within you. The world may look your way with admiration one day, and with suspicion the next, but your purpose remains unshaken, written not in the sand of popularity, but in the stone of divine intention. The temptation to chase after applause is strong. It offers an immediate sense of worth, a tangible sign that we matter, yet it is deceptive, for applause is not always a reflection of truth. The crowd cheers not necessarily for what is right, but for what is entertaining, convenient, or comfortable. If you tether your worth to their praise, you will find yourself bending to their expectations, altering your path to maintain their approval, losing sight of the very calling that set you apart. And in doing so, you exchange the steady for the unstable, the eternal for the temporary. Equally dangerous is the weight of rejection. To be misunderstood, criticized, or dismissed can cut deeply. It can make you question whether the mark upon you is real, whether the calling is true, whether you have mistaken your path. But rejection, too, is fleeting. Today's critic may become tomorrow's admirer, and the one who dismisses you now may later depend on the very treasure you carry. To let rejection define you is to give temporary voices the authority to silence an eternal calling. You are not chosen to be measured by the crowd's acceptance. You are chosen because God Himself has entrusted you with purpose. That purpose is written into your very being. It is not something you have to invent, nor something you can lose if others fail to see it. It is woven into your design, embedded in your soul, part of the very essence of who you are. This is why you may feel restless in places that others find comfortable, why you may sense a hunger for more when others are satisfied with less, why you cannot easily silence the pull towards something greater. It is not ambition, it is calling, and calling does not vanish simply because the world is indifferent or hostile. To live from this truth is to find freedom. You are free from the exhausting pursuit of approval, free from the paralyzing fear of rejection, free to walk in alignment with what you were made for. It does not mean you will never struggle with the desire to be noticed, but it means you will no longer be enslaved to it. The applause may come, and if it does, you receive it with gratitude but do not cling to it. The criticism may come, and if it does, you endure it with patience but do not let it define you. In both, your eyes remain fixed on the one who called you, and your heart remains steady in the purpose He has given. This steadiness is what the world most desperately needs, though it may not admit it. People are weary of the instability of shifting standards, the emptiness of hollow recognition, the uncertainty of changing values. When they encounter someone whose life is anchored in something beyond the rise and fall of opinion, it awakens in them a longing for the same foundation. They notice the peace that does not collapse under criticism, the joy that does not inflate with applause, the confidence that does not depend on being seen. Such steadiness is magnetic, for it reveals that there is another way to live, a way not tethered to the fleeting but to the eternal. Your purpose is not measured by the size of your platform or the volume of applause, but by the faithfulness with which you steward what has been placed within you. A candle may seem small, but it carries the same flame as a blazing torch. Your calling may not bring you before crowds, but it will always place you before people who need what you carry. The world may never celebrate you with loud acclaim, but if you remain faithful, lives will be touched, hearts will be changed, and the mark of God upon you will accomplish what it was meant to accomplish. The fleeting gaze of the world can never compare to the steady gaze of God. To live for the former is to be tossed about, never settled, always striving. To live for the latter is to find peace, purpose, and direction. You are not chosen to entertain the crowd nor to escape its criticism, but to live out a purpose that was etched into your being before you took your first breath. That purpose may not always align with what the world applauds, but it will always align with what is true, and in the end, truth is what endures when applause and rejection alike have faded away.